Alright folks, Red-Rupee here with a rundown of the new patch notes for 0.11.5 that dropped just before the 4th ESL qualifier tournament we had just over the weekend. I wanted to go over the big stuff and also talk about potential meta implications, so I found a frontline Iron Harvest ringer to join me since I'm no ace myself. We'll be showcasing some of his gameplay while we chat, which you can find over at his Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TroydDestin, and showcasing some specific highlights and relevant clips. Our conversation went longer than expected, but yielded lots of fun meta talk, balanced discussion, and theory crafting, so hang with us and watch, or feel free to just sit back and listen to this like a podcast, and let's dive into the patch notes. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest Troyd to the channel. What's going on, Troyd?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
You're one of the better players. We'll see. This is recorded before the tournament, so we'll see what happens. I'm hoping you're up there, man, because we were rooting for you on my stream last weekend.
I will give it my best. We'll see how it plays out because it's a brand new meta. Who knows what kind of things people have come up with?
Yeah, I know this patch has like really brought a lot of new things into the forefront.
It's not the same game.
Yeah, it's totally different. So I'm pretty excited to see what's happening. And like so far, every tournament has been pretty different. The first tournament was just Rusviet cheese, and then we had like some Saxony slipping in qualifier 2, and then qualifier 3 was base rushes and all kinds of other. I don't know. It was really neat so far to see this. I know you were on the wrong side of some of that.
I was on the wrong side of all of that.
Oh,
Every
man.
single one of them. First tournament, Rusviet's in the face. Second tournament, Saxony at the very end after throwing away my Olga, and then the base rushes in the third tournament. So I've been the receiving end on all of the cheese so far.
Oh man, well you're going to be great to talk to about all these potential meta shakeups here with all these patches. So we're looking at the patch notes here. Let's get into it before we start talking too much meta here. So the first big one is the melee system getting overhauled. Now you have to actively tell your squad to engage in melee, or they will not melee. Thank God.
It's such a great change. Not only does it improve the flow of infantry combat, it allows you to actually have firefights. Because you would go through entire games where just half your units would not be shooting.
Yeah, especially if you're playing like a closer range, like if you guys are fighting on the other side, like opposing sides of cover, or like you're playing with like close range vanguards or something like that, half the time they would just always move in. Even your flamethrowers, which is super frustrating.
Oh, especially flamethrowers, because their whole thing is like aerial denial in front of them, right? And you don't want to walk into their flame things or you take massive damage. But now you can like roll up to some cover with your SMG Saxon troopers and actually shoot them over the cover instead of going into some melee. Yeah,
it's like it's a quality of life improvement. It changes how the game plays. It was just so necessary, and I'm so glad it's in for like these final rounds of tournaments, because it should make things pretty different.
Yeah, you should see a lot more firefights. You'll see a lot more cover to cover engagements and less like units running around in circles on the map.
The next like big quality of life thing is like just putting production buildings on hotkeys, because that was driving me crazy. Having to like actually click down on the tiny little button in the corner of the screen.
Oh yeah, you guys all did that. So how I dealt with that is I just used a camera location in my base.
Oh yeah? Oh, that's right. Yeah, I guess you could do that.
Yeah. So I set a hotkey. Now it's F1, F2, 3. I don't need to do this anymore, but I just set a hotkey that was a camera location in my base. So I flip back to my base, left click on the building, hit the hotkey, and then bounce back to my unit.
Oh, there you go.
And that's how I got around that.
Oh, see, well, you have a totally different like mindset from me, anyways, because you use like the default controls. You have WASD on your camera movement, which is like something I've actually not seen from other players so far.
I'm surprised, but we can get into that later.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. So what else? Mission challenges. That's kind of, hopefully things are looking a little fixed from that. But let's get into the meat of it. Let's get into the balance changes. There were tons of other like quiet updates too. There were audio updates, visual updates, effects. Like there's tons of stuff like snuck into this patch that was like pretty huge.
All those visual and audio ones just made the game more immersive. Like things just sound better, things just look better. It's more of a joy to watch, and I'm excited for when there's going to be an observer or replay mode for you caster type people.
Oh man, totally.
Because then you can actually start showing this game off to people, because right now you have to watch a stream. There's no other way to watch the game right now.
Yeah. I mean, myself and Too Sketchy, like we kind of just lurk around during the tournaments and like bounce between streams to try to
Yeah.
cast what little bit we can, just to give people an idea of what's actually going on while you guys are playing.
Yeah, and you have to do that from the perspective of the streamer as opposed to, objectively watching the match and commentating, right?
Yeah. We're doing it all first person mode, so we're just kind of bouncing around the map and trying to catch the little plays here and there because, as a player, you're bouncing around. You're not necessarily watching each engagement as it rolls out, so...
Exactly, right? So you only get that glimpse of something happening, whereas if you were the spectator caster, you would actually watch the play as it happened and, lose your mind over it or describe what was happening.
Yeah.
Whereas the player is just bouncing away because they know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we're trying to get an idea. Like when you're panning the camera around real fast, we're like, all right, are the points upgrading? did the enemy get a big oil mine there? I'm not sure. We don't know what their level of tech is.
Yeah, exactly, right. But in observer mode, you'd have all that.
But anyways, moving on to balance. Like here, so the first big one is the reserve changes. So
Yeah,
all the infantry heroes now cost 2 points for a reserve. And now Reserve 2 doesn't require Reserve 1 at all to be deployed. It requires both the barracks and the workshop, and one of them being advanced. So you can entirely skip Reserve 1 now.
Right.
And then
they also increased the cost of Reserve 1 as well, I believe.
Right, yeah. So the cost is increased a little bit. And and they also shook up the cost of a couple things. Strasniks and Eisenhans are now only 2 reserve points as opposed to 3. So I don't know if they're just trying to shake it up a little bit and make people pay for those more, or...
They're trying to encourage people to use those units. Well, I guess what that tells me, when they've changed the cost without much, they didn't even put it in the patch notes here, because this is not detailed. These aren't detailed patch notes. They're just general patch notes. But when they're lowering the cost like that, that tells me is that they're looking at the data and they're going, okay, these units are picked less. Why? And then they look at the cost and go, oh, they're rather expensive. So perhaps if we lower the cost, we'll see more of these units get used. And that's my opinion on why they're lowering this cost. Is they're trying to encourage the use of those units in the reserve one and perhaps promote a wider array of diversity when it comes to reserve ones that are chosen by people.
Right, exactly. Yeah, giving people a few more options that look more appealing too. Like, oh, maybe I can squeeze this 2 point into my build now, as opposed to before. But then with all the Reserve 1 heroes costing a little more, now it kind of... Because we barely saw mech heroes, I feel like, at all so far.
I don't think we'll see them any further as well. With these changes, Reserve 2 comes later as well, right? Due to the extra fuel cost from you have to go... is it really later? Yeah, it is later, because you have to go barracks, and then you have to choose between advanced barracks and workshop. And you can get a quicker one if you go advanced barracks. Actually, I haven't mathed it out correctly yet, but my impression was that Reserve 2 came later as of these changes.
Yeah, I think it still will come a bit later because you can't like before you could kind of just like blitz advanced barracks and then go shoot right up your reserves.
But you had to get Reserve 1 before, so does the cost... I'm pretty sure the cost... No, it probably costs more still. I'm going to work off the assumption, and you can correct me if this is wrong later, that Reserve 2 comes later.
Yeah, I'll do some math. I'll put it up on the screen for the people that are watching later. We'll get the numbers to prove whether we're smart or not.
Or you could just edit this part out.
Yeah, there we
go. So my understanding is Reserve 2 comes later now. And that means that it's almost as if you shouldn't go for those mech heroes anymore. Or even just because your tier 1 hero can generate so much pressure on the map that the cost that you would get from, the cost efficiencies from going Reserve 2 and getting those mechs, you would recover from just having more oil by having more map presence with your tier 1 hero. Just because the period of time to Reserve 2 is much longer, there's a greater period of time in which you can use that advantage to generate oil income. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, like you said, the tier 1 heroes have such a big impact on the game. They can really secure like some early dominance, early map control, and at least deny like those early infantry pushes.
And if you're up against someone who's chosen a Reserve 2 hero, and Reserve 2 heroes are powerful, don't get me wrong, you have an almost uncontestable advantage when you have an R1 hero out, and and you as the R2 player don't have a hero out, right? You have to somehow check this hero with regular units.
Which most of the heroes completely decimate.
Right. On top of his normal army, and let's assume that you've traded, you're evenly trading, you both haven't lost units. He's going to have a 3-unit advantage plus a hero on you during the R1 phase, right? You better have a damn good hold on your resources if you're going to make it to R2 before he overpowers you and takes all your nodes.
Yeah, definitely. That said, like maybe there's something with Lek now, since he's only 1 cost as opposed to all the others. You could do like a huge reserve 2 if you can get there with Polania. You know, you can Lek Zolter or something like that.
Yeah, the problem. So the thread with Polania is that the structures cost less, so there's less time to get to reserve 2.
Right.
It's not so much the cost 1 aspect. It's just that the window in which a tier 1 hero has room is shorter with a Polanian R2 play.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the other changes. They, just since we're mentioning it, they added a little faction variance too. So the Polania barracks, advanced barracks, and workshop are all cheaper, and then Rusviet, they actually made the workshop and advanced workshop more expensive, but balanced it by making their mechs cost a bit less.
Yeah, and so like the Polanian barracks is like something like 15 fuel cheaper. Their workshop is 30 fuel cheaper. It's like a minute or 2 worth of time in terms of timing, right? Like
it's not insignificant. I think once people like figure out the timings of that a little more, things like I was talking to someone, and despite the Strauss now costing 2 reserve points less, we were talking about how with the lower workshop cost that it might just be better to like pick up your workshop and buy one, Straussnik right out of the gate, you know?
And then use the cost efficiency of R2. Like R2 is super cost efficient. Like you get free fuel units basically, right?
Right. Big fuel.
And that's that logic that he's going there is just you're already building a workshop, right? Why not build a Strasnik for your mid game while you're stalling for your R2? Let's say it's a Tur and something else, right?
Right.
Maybe a Loka or the bunker thing. What's the mobile bunker called?
The Zol?
Yeah, the Zol.
Yeah.
But either one of those units would be great.
Yeah.
R2 choices on top of Lex, right? And Lex is a great hero. Now, when you do that, like if you're up against an R1 hero, you better have some oil control. Like, otherwise you're not making it. But then, to be said, like with the cheaper Polanian structures, we've already kind of gone over this. You don't need as much oil as the other factions do in order to get to the R2. And conversely, a Russian R2 is extremely expensive and time consuming. So like I don't know if there's a case to be made to ever play Zubov given how long it takes to get to him.
Right, exactly. Like he seems like a very powerful mech hero, but yeah, it's he's competing with Olga, and like you said, it's going to take even longer for the Rusviet to get there because their buildings are more expensive.
On top of that, Russian mechs kind of are late game, right?
Yeah, I mean, relatively, it seems like that's been the consensus, is that the Rusviet kind of roll on that early game more than their late. But I guess
right.
Speaking of Rusviet, we can kind of move into them. So they got hit with the old Nerf bat. Both Olga and the Groza got nerfed. So Olga had her health decreased and the detonator damage decreased. And Groza got a little all around, actually. I was kind of surprised. So they got their XP for veterancy increased, their jump damage reduced, their movement speed reduced, and they cost more. Do you think that's a bit of an overnerf, or do you think that brings them into line? Have you played against them much since the patch?
I've played against them a little bit, yeah. So the problem with the Grozas was their proliferation and cost efficiency. It wasn't that the unit was overly powered. Yes, the jump damage did a little bit more than it probably should.
Yeah.
Yes, they vetted it quickly, and yes, you got these 2 bottles for free. The problem is that it wasn't that like one Groza squad was going to end the game, right?
Right.
You could handle it with like a mech, or you with your hero. You could check it with concentrated fire. You could throw down a mine. You could get your own exoskeletons. You could rush a light mech to help deal with them, right? It was the fact they had 3 or 4 of these squads, not just one.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, once like you said, one is an approachable problem, but when 3 squads just jump in on your position and chunk your squads down to half health before the fight even starts, what are you gonna do?
Exactly. And the other thing is that they healed for free.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll see that one of the changes here is Exos hits healing from base now cost resources as opposed
Yeah,
to
which
all Exos.
applies to everything, not just the Grozas. That was
Right.
across the board now.
So if they didn't do this, you would be seeing Eisenhahn spam because Eisenhahns are basically 1,000 HP of medium armor that you heal for free.
Yeah, I think I saw you doing some Eisenhahn spam the past few days, haven't
I
you?
was working on something, and it was amazing against Saxons and Polanians, but trash against Rusviets. But anyway,
Yeah.
and
So,
that's how,
how do you feel about the cost of the exosuit heal? I feel like it might be actually a little prohibitive right now.
maybe. But so the role of the Groza is to push around unarmored units.
Right?
Um, so that it does extremely well. It will go on your flank, push a unit off your flag on your flank, like a harassing infantry, and it will win that fight for you every time. 100%. Nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Once it's out of the fight, you can retreat and then go push another part of the map, some isolated infantry squad over there. So all you need, like, it might be a little bit of an over nerf, but like I think people were using them in the wrong way. The Groza is essentially a light mech with even more mobility than most light mechs. Like,
Right.
it's supposed to push away harassing units on the flanks, and then in a large engagement exploit opportunities such as jumping on top of a field gun.
Yeah.
Right.
Instead, it became a core army unit that was what you were massing to have field forces.
Right. Which was garbage, right? Like these are supposed to be like elite infantry essentially that are more specifically they're unarmored unit counters.
Yeah, they have a
They're all
specific
in-
role as opposed to a generalist unit, which they very much
Exactly.
became.
Yes. So now they're more, and I think it'll take a while for Rusviet's players to understand this, but all you need to do is use it on the flanks, exploit weaknesses during a large engagement, uh, and understand that it's a unit that pushes away unarmored targets, and it's not a generalist unit. Feels the same. There's just not 7 Groza squads coming for you.
Sure, right, yeah. I mean, their vanguards are still unchanged. They can still muscle you around in the early game if they get the good positioning. They can kind of just
Olga
rush
will
in.
still fuck you up with her SMG. She can still dive in and TNT your team weapons. She can still attach TNT to your mechs.
Yeah, she's
not a
still
joke,
fast.
right?
She's still obnoxious. She's still gonna give you a headache. You can't see
Yeah,
when
but
she's
she's not-
coming.
Yeah, you can't, that's true. But she also isn't going to sit there and tank your entire army now.
Yeah,
And she's
yeah. I
also
think
not
that's
gonna
the big.
one-shot your-
I think a big thing of making her a little easier to bring down will solve a bit of that headache.
It was the same issue with Gunter. Like,
Oh my gosh.
2 weeks
Yeah.
ago. It was more, but like Gunter was even worse.
Yeah, Gunther the
Uh,
Beefcake. I mean, he could just tank a whole army.
Right, but with Olga, she had a large HP pool and can just like get on her tiger and run away. Right.
Right.
Onto a bad
Yeah,
situation.
so
You can still
frustrating.
do that, but you have an opportunity. Like she has less HP, so there's a higher chance of being able to punish her when she overextends now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Before she could overextend and just fucking leave. Now she has to like consider whether or not this is a good situation to dive into, and maybe perhaps wait for things to be more favorable instead of just always go in.
Yeah,
and
always
roll
just like the
something.
full army engagement. Just dive in and blow something up and run away, and then start meleeing something else.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean that's always a good change for the game, especially like a strategy game. I feel like it's always a good change when you're creating a new decision that the player has to make, as opposed to like
Right.
an obvious solution.
Right. It's exactly. I agree. And what games should be are a series of interesting choices.
Right.
And when there's not an interesting choice to be made, and there's only like there's a difference between this is the only way I can. There's a difference between this is the only way I can come back because he's playing a certain way, and I can if I can just get the right proper counter build in order to beat him, as opposed to this is the only solution. This is my hammer for every nail. Right.
Away from the nerfs, let's take a look at Polania. We've got some buffs coming in from the other end. So Smiali got its damage increase, Loka got a little HP and damage buff, and then I feel like one of the most impactful ones is the rifleman range is actually increased now.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a huge one.
Yeah, I mean I've played a few Polania games since, and man, the rifles feel great now. I mean you can pretty much outshoot everything, and if so long as you're like kiting around and minding your cover, they're a lot more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, they're not like you can just go engage them in every. Okay, let me rephrase that. you could project your damage with, even though you do less damage than everyone else, you can project it at a larger range. And then when people are coming in to engage you in cover, they will take damage before they get to you, and then you can make decisions from there, right?
Yeah, yeah. It feels like you can actually get like a volley down now as the enemy's approaching, and then
Yeah.
like if they continue, then the engagement starts. Whereas before, the timing seemed such that you'd pretty much fire first, and then they would fire back, and then the engage, like you weren't getting that kind of additional volley in, and you then didn't have time to reposition or anything if you got rushed down.
Right. And then, so in that situation, at least before the range change, you would be in a situation where you'd be facing shotguns to the face immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Or SMGs to the face immediately. And then on top of that, guess what? Your units don't have a lower melee value than both no, just Rusviets, I think it is now, but you're going to lose the melee fight anyway, right?
Right,
So,
which before the patch they were inevitably going to do, whether you wanted them to or not.
right, exactly. Less of a thing now, but at least now, when you're a Saxon or a Rusviet and you're looking at the Polanians and cover across the way and wrecked, you think twice about charging across that open cover.
Right, right, yeah. It's and again, I feel like that's another like now we have another cool interaction between infantry, whereas before it was just kind of like, oh, there's rifles, go rush them down.
Right, and to your point, that now we have a wider array of interesting decisions during the infantry phase at the start of the game.
So now that we kind of have these major balance changes, and this was kind of like a lot of the key stuff that people were calling for. What do you think now is kind of most out of place, or what's the most powerful thing in the game now that Rusviets have been brought online?
Saxon artillery unit.
Oh yeah,
that thing is, oh man.
the Erlkönig?
I am unsure what beats that. What beats a Saxon Kaiser wall with one Earl? Is it an Erlinker or something like that?
Erlkönig.
Erlkönig.
The Elf King.
The Elf King. There's one Elf King camping the VP.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a heck of a wall.
Yeah. Well, okay, just take away the Kaiser wall. If there is one Elf King camping watching a capture point, because in this game it's not like Up to Heroes where you can stand around the capture point to get the cap.
Mm-hmm.
Here you have to actually lower and raise the flag on the thing.
Right, yeah, that's more
that,
Dawn of War style,
right.
and now especially that you can be interrupted while you're doing that. You can't cap under fire effectively. It's pretty difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So what that means is that in the game design, one artillery unit can control a VP.
Sure.
You don't ever have to push onto your opponent's side of the map. You don't have to risk units. You just have to cap it once and then park an artillery unit to guard it. Done. And you can hold that for literally hours on end, because every unit that goes and tries to capture that point, immediately it'll get 2 seconds in, and then an artillery shell lands on it and it's almost dead.
Right.
That unit's dead, basically, right? Or they get scattered and they lose all their progress. So what that means is that, and my prediction, at least if other people haven't realized it tomorrow, is that Saxony is going to sit there with a Kaiser outside their base to prevent base rushes and take on main engagements. They're going to have one Elf King camping the center VP, and then they're going to use their main force to control to push back any pushes on their home VP or exploit any opportunities from overextensions. And you are not going to get by that because you can't actually decap the middle VP, and you can't defeat their main army because their main army is Saxony.
Right.
So how the fuck do you get on top of the artillery unit, aside from a bunch of Grozas jumping around into the back?
Sure.
That's the only thing I can think of. But by that time, you've got a mine guarding your Elf King, and then maybe Gunter chilling around there, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was thinking kind of the same thing, but with how do you feel about the Rusviet artillery, the Nakovalnia, I think it's called, something similar to that. I don't know. I'm not very good.
Yeah.
But the Sentry mode on that thing, once you get it vetted, destroys everything.
Yep. Same idea with Rusviets. The problem with Rusviets is that I think they are actually the weakest faction right now.
Oh sure.
I don't think. Yeah, at least my experience. I haven't played against too many good players so far, but I have not been beaten using Saxony against anyone other than Saxons.
Oh man, interesting. Okay.
So because The Rusviets relied so heavily on the Groza. I
Mm-hmm.
think the weaknesses of the late game for Rusviets are starting to be exposed.
Sure.
Yes, that artillery unit is boss, and I think it's a good buy against Saxony, just because Saxony doesn't have a lot of units that can like dive.
And you
They
can
have
even
actually
get
no
it
units that can
at a
dive.
base workshop as well, right?
Right. You can get a base workshop. You can roll it in. You can get like 3 of them in your R2 while still having an R1. Right.
Sure.
I think that heavy artillery from Rusevitz is probably the way to go for late game, just because all the other mechs are kind of lacking,
Right.
honestly. And yes, once it gets to the problem is getting to Sentry, right? So if you're up against someone who understands that, they're gonna just, as soon as they hear firing, they're just gonna leave.
Yeah, was that
Yeah.
like if you're doing enough damage with your artillery that you got them vetted, then you're probably already winning, was my idea.
Yeah, and you're just locking it in with Sentry mode, which is fine. But it's the same concept where an artillery unit can camp the VP, right?
Right.
And you don't have to, once you have that central VP, whether it be wrecked or oil, because fuck border rivers, your artillery piece is going to be in range of that middle VP. And it's very easy to control your own VP with a bunker and maybe an AT cannon over top of it, and then you pivot your infantry to deal with anything that pushes on it.
Mm-hmm.
But like again, it's going to come to like I feel like now that we're not having these mobile games with Grozas everywhere, it's going to come down to who has the middle VP, who has an artillery piece parked over the middle VP.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So do you think there's going to be like a hard timing where like you need to control that VP when your R2 hits or when your artillery hits to kind of like really lock the game?
I wouldn't call it a hard timing because we're talking about units that are from R2 and or advanced workshops,
Right.
right? So we're talking about you need to, plus you don't want to buy an artillery unit if you don't have a means of protecting it, so i.e. Kaiser,
Sure.
right? Yeah. So it's soft timing in the sense that once you have the ability to buy one, you should make sure you cap that middle VP. And then when it comes out, you can immediately park it over that VP
Mm-hmm.
and then just profit, right?
Yeah,
And
makes a
just
lot of
turtle,
sense.
And then just turtle. Then just turtle, right? What are they going to do? Are they going to push into your Kaiser and AT guns? No.
No, of course not.
And you don't even need to win engagements. Because once that happens, they have to come to you. They have to overextend into your lines. They have to overextend into your AT guns. They have to do all the positioning that you can exploit when
Right.
they're trying to, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what Saxony feels
you
like
put the
when you
ball
get to
in
that
their
late
court.
game. Is that
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a tough nut to break.
Exactly. And you put the ball in their court and you say, okay, I have the game now.
Yeah, come at me, bro.
Can you beat my army? Come at me, bro. Can you beat my army? The answer is usually no. You can't beat their army because they're fucking Saxony. And that's what I ran into against in Jute in the qualifier 2.
Right.
And it's also when I defeated Well Played TV, he did the same thing to me as well. But what happened was he got greedy with his Kaisers, and then I destroyed them with a bunch of ATs.
Yeah, I remember
right?
that game.
Yeah, and so he lost his wall, and I was able to exploit, right? But keeping, like, if you just have one Kaiser, or even, like, ideally 2 for late game once you've
Oh,
let
yeah,
enough
yeah.
infantry, right?
Two gets crazy to try to break.
And one Elf King backing you up, they cannot take back that middle VP because of the way the game is designed.
So as far
That's my
as
prediction.
like what you're expecting to see next in the upcoming patches, is there any like big change you're kind of wanting? Is that something on your list as maybe like
I don't know.
more
Either you make artillery less accurate, or more specifically Saxon artillery less accurate, or even Rush Lucid artillery less accurate, in which case they're less valuable units. That doesn't actually solve it, because guess what? The super heavies have a lot of range, right?
Right.
So they can also camp. AT guns have a ton of range. I think this is actually just a part of the game and its design at this point, right?
Sure.
It's like because units have to cap a flag in a little circle. Anything that has an explosive shell can infinitely control a VP or a VP, because
Right.
it's a flag.
So
It's
you're
not
you're
a big,
gonna yeah
it's
you're
not a
gonna have to
big
deal with it.
resource node, right? It's
Exactly.
not a big resource node. You have your units are concentrated. They can get wiped out in one shot. It's a game design thing. I don't know whether it's a flaw yet. It might be intentional, but I feel like at some point the meta is going to evolve to, you have to decide when you're going to see when do you have the capability to own that middle VP period.
Yeah,
right?
because it takes a while. The VP captures are not quick.
Exactly. That might be another way to address it, is quicker VP captures. maybe removing the bonus cap. I don't know. There's ways to probably other ways to approach it. But right now, as it stands, an artillery unit will control that middle VP, and we're making the assumption. We're making assumptions that you will always have your home VP because obviously that would be a fight over there, right? And that we're assuming that we have two equal forces that control their sides of the map, right? That can't dislodge each other. And the winner of those two equal forces, and that's usually two great players, is going to be the one who capped the middle VP first.
Exactly.
Like 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes ago. And then for 10 minutes, the other guy is going to try and grab the middle VP and just fail.
Sure.
Unless a decisive battle happens in which the guy who holds the VP loses everything, right?
Sure.
But that shouldn't happen in theory because you're holding a defensive formation on your side.
In theory, you should have your defender's advantage at that point, right?
Right, exactly. So it's not impossible, but the threshold is extremely high, and I'm unsure how to beat it because I've been using it, and I've had I've had some other Cup of Heroes players that I've played like matches on my own with who've been playing the game, and they do the same thing to me.
Right.
And it's just 20 minutes of how the fuck do you get that point back?
All right. Well,
the only other option is harassing their home point, but they're in defensive formation, so you're not getting on that either, right? So you have to win a fight on their flank, or you have to. It's not easy.
And Trax is a really hard map to like flank on. It seems like everything's just right there in the center.
Right. On oil, it's more plausible because you have to actually move your troops over. But usually you can see them coming. You can pivot your heavies to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, you can see everything coming in this game. Everything gives a lot of vision.
Right. So unless vision gets shorter, you will never get surprised on oil spill unless you're not keeping any units on your flank, right? Then you deserve to get flanked. And then border river is just cancer. So, but it's even worse.
There's only two possible paths, and the third one's wired up. And oh my gosh, what a nightmare that map can be.
And then and you can park an artillery unit in your base to guard your home flag.
Right.
So,
questionable.
So how do you actually get at that? And so on border river, it's probably more viable to just dive the base because of the way that map is set up.
I feel like you have some PTSD from that one.
I do, but like I realize looking at the map design that because the flags are so far apart that you basically have a gap in the middle of the map, right?
Right.
And unless you put some force in the way in the middle of the map, which I clearly didn't do enough of, they can just go straight for your base.
Right.
On wrecked and oil, that's not really an option. Maybe more so on oil, but definitely not on wrecked because of you tend to have the main body of your force in the middle of the map, right?
Right. All right. Well, I think we're starting to go a little wide here.
Sorry.
No worries. No, it's great talk. I love just talking this kind of analysis with people. It's great, and people love hearing it too. It's good stuff. With that all wrapped up, make sure you check out Troyd on his Twitch channel. That's up on the screen now. So go follow him. He's an awesome player, and you don't stream super long hours or anything, but you do hop on pretty consistently, right?
U.S. time zone usually. I'm Canadian, so unfortunately everyone else is probably European.
Yeah. It seems like a pretty Euro and Russian dominated game right now.
Yeah, so I'm like the lone Canadian, carrying the banner of Polania.
There you go. I mean, I'm East Coast U.S., so I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah, there you go.
But all right, thanks for hanging out, everybody. This was fun. Next time some big stuff comes out, maybe you can come back out. We'll chat some more. It was a good time, and hope you guys enjoyed it.